This is problem 2 from the review sheet for exam 6, I believe. Exam over quadratic equations and rational equations primarily. This is a quadratic equation. The reason we know that is because the highest power of the variable is 2. Our technique for solving quadratic equations involves factoring the polynomial. And in order to have it ready to factor, we want all the terms of the polynomial on one side, and we want 0 on the other side of the equation, which we have in this instance. So our first step here is to try to factor that trinomial. Remember, in factoring, you want to look for a common factor first if one exists. And we have no common factor here of these three terms, other than one, which doesn't do us any good to factor that out. If trinomials factor, they factor into the product of two binomials. Since that's minus 2, that tells us we need a plus and a minus in our binomials. The way to get 3x squared is 1x times 3x. The way to get 2 is 1 times 2. So 1x and 3x need to be put somewhere in the first positions. 1 and 2 need to be put in the second positions of our binomials. And we want to get a minus 5x. I think if I choose that arrangement, that should give that to me. Here, the O of FOIL is now minus 6x. The I of FOIL is plus 1x. And minus 6 plus 1 combines to minus 5. So I have the factorization that I need. Once we've found the factorization, then remember the analysis we use. If the product of these two quantities is equal to 0, then either this quantity somehow is 0 or that quantity is 0. And the way those quantities become 0 depends upon what I put in place for x. Let's take this quantity since it's the easier of the two. What value could I put in place of x that would make this quantity become 0? Well, 2 minus 2 would make 0, wouldn't it? So if x is equal to 2, this quantity becomes 0, and 0 times anything is 0. And remember, to be a solution, the left side has to become the same as the right side of any equation. And so if x was 2, the left side would become 0, and we have one of our solutions. Now, this solution is a little more difficult to see. Let's cover this up just for a moment. What would have to be under my hand in order for that quantity to become 0? Wouldn't it have to be -1 so that -1 plus 1 was 0? So what I was covering up, 3x, has to equal -1, so that -1 plus 1 makes that quantity 0. So 3 times x has to be -1. Well, that's just a simple linear equation I can solve, isn't it? By dividing both sides by 3. So if x was -1/3, -1/3 times 3, the 3's would cancel, giving me -1. -1 plus 1 is 0. 0 times anything is 0. And we've found our two solutions to that quadratic equation. Remember, that's what happens most times. It's a second degree or quadratic equation, and most times that equation will have two solutions. It can't have more than 2. It may have fewer than 2. In this case, my two solutions were -1/3 and 2.